And as I continue to burrow into really international lineage of music and rhythm, it's important to capture those who learned from the original masters of music and are now giving back and passing on that wisdom and knowledge and spirit and physicality to a younger generation of musicians through spontaneous improvisational creation. Get a chance today to speak to somebody who has been doing it for decades. Stephan Maass, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
So I'm excited to be here. It's fantastic to
Well, it's an
speak
honor
to
to,
you.
it's just such an honor to connect with you, man. I wanted you to talk a little bit about in your life how psychically healing rhythm has been for you in your existence.
Um, I started at the age of maybe 13, 14, and to play music. So I started to play a little drums, and then there was a band where I was at school, and I really wanted to play in this band. And unfortunately, my teacher was playing drums in this band, so no chance for me. And they suggested I should play percussion, and I didn't even know at that time what percussion is. So they gave me, hey, yeah, really. So
I dig, yeah, I dig.
in Germany, so percussion was at that time, beginning 80s, it was not so big. It was classical percussion, drum set for sure, but percussion, yeah, not too much. And then they gave me tapes and records, and I was listening to a lot of stuff and music, especially in the beginning, Santana, when I started playing congas. And I started with one conga, and that's the instrument I could afford at that time. And so I had one conga and started to play in this band, and I was able to play two rhythms, I think, and um, and after 3 months, and then we played the first concert at this school, and I was really happy, and that's where it started, and it grew. I never stopped since then. So I still love it, and I'm curious, and I go for it, and that's quite a while now.
I'm curious. I, I realized that you were, you know, the early 80s when you started to play. I wanted to ask you about a few guys that I've tracked down that a couple of them I've tracked down, really luminary cats from that general region from where you grew up. And just want to know if you were familiar with them or if you actually had any playing contact or personal contact with them.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, One is Wolfgang Downer. One is
Yeah,
one is Volker Krieger, and then the
yeah,
other the other one who I did interview was still one of my favorite interviews, Klaus Doldinger.
yeah. He is my neighbor.
Oh
He
my God,
lives.
dude, this is so freaking beautiful, man. Dude, Klaus is one of my heroes, man.
Yeah, I grew up with his records with all this passport stuff and
Oh
that.
my
Uh,
God. So there was a lot of percussion on that, though.
yes, he played a lot with percussionists from Brazil. They lived in Munich at that time. Some of them I had lessons with, because all these guys you name, uh, Wolfgang Downer, for example. I played with his son Flo Downer, who's a fantastic drummer.
Oh my
So
God.
and it's all this generation a little bit older than me, and Volker Kriegel, he was amazing too, amazing records during the 70s and
Dude,
the 80s. So they,
he was as good as Larry
yes,
Coryell or Pat Martini. He was the best, man.
yeah, so much great music at that time too, and that was the music I grew up when I went to the clubs in the 80s and to listen to music, definitely.
Now
And
you,
all this.
I want to be clear though, like because I mean, again, I'm just a naive 46-year-old American cat.
Uh-huh.
Um, Early 80s in the clubs here was prime time, uh, like heavy disco, a lot of electronic drum machines. You're telling
Hmm.
me that in clubs in Germany that you were listening to like Klaus Doldinger and Wolfgang Downer when you were going
Mhm.
to like that was the music that was being played on over the if it wasn't a live band.
Yeah. Um, and it was there were some other people because at that time when I started, I was not able to play a studio session, so I was a beginner. But at that time, there was a very huge studio scene in Munich. You know Harold Faltermeyer, for example. He lives on the other side of Munich. We recorded a lot
I
together.
cannot believe you just brought his name up. Dude, I cannot because I was my daughters and I were watching the original Beverly Hills Cop, and
Yeah,
he is ripping it up, and it's the sickest, it's the greatest synthesizers I've ever heard. And I reached
yeah.
out to his publicist here, and I never heard back. I can't. You guys are similar age, though, right?
He's a little. He's. I think
He's a
he's
little bit older.
maybe
Yeah.
13 or 14 years older than
Nice.
me. So it's
Nice.
so it's a little bit. They started about 10, 15 years earlier than me, but that was a like Giorgio Moroder and all these stuff. They were all here at that time,
Oh my! Are you kidding
and
me? This is insanity, man.
yeah, a lot of things were going on here. And that was the studio scene when I was a little bit older, when I finished schools. So I was in these studios to record like all kinds of music, a little bit jazz and film music for TV and stuff. That was my learning process because I never studied in a sense of classical music or anything. So most of the time, I would say I'm autodidact. I had lessons with very good people, and when somebody was in town, I tried to get lessons. But that was the time in Munich where a lot of things were produced, and as a young musician, I had always the fortune to have great mentors who brought me into situations to learn, like studio work and bands, and I was always the youngest guy in the band, so that was a learning process that was amazing. And
Let's just
I
break it down.
met,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but I met Harold. I met Harold the first time for that we worked together was I think in 2000. He produced a Austrian singer, and I was in this band, and so we met in his studio. That was the first time we worked together.
So they obviously saw that you had natural raw talent in the band. They gave you a conga drum. Um, and could you just talk about some of, when even in your early, would you say your professional career started in like 82 or 83? When was your first studio gig?
Um, I recorded the first time on an album in I think it was in 1984, and then I did a long time. I did nothing because I was at school. I played concerts. I would say the professional path started in 89, 88, 89. So
Going
I
back to
had to
84,
decide.
I want to go back to 84 for a minute though. Like,
Yeah.
what is your what there was a big film industry scene in Munich. I mean, that's very interesting to me. I mean, as clearly in this country, at one time you had Stax Records in Memphis, you had Muscle Shoals and in
Uh-huh.
Alabama, you had Atlantic in New York, you had all these incredible regional hotbeds of recording. Was music the standard bearer of recording in Europe? Was it was that electric at that and is that true?
I would say at that time it was just challenging for me, and so during the 80s a lot of things changed technically, so I played a lot of things. I had the fortune that one of my friends, he studied in Berkeley, and he came back and he started a company, and they did all kinds of music and stuff, and a lot of programming started, so a lot of things changed anyway, and it was always challenging for me to play an instrument like that is still, if I go into my rehearsal room, I think it's always very archaic. Do you say it in English? Archaic? Yeah.
Archaic.
Archaic, right?
Yeah,
That's the right word.
yeah.
And during this time in the 80s, a lot of things changed, definitely, and a lot of things at the end of the 80s disappeared from especially Munich too. And there was a lot of change going on with drum machines and all these notator programs and all MIDI stuff and all of that. And a lot of people lost work and um, so it was a first phase for me where I realized, okay, this is the way they make music now. So I grew up with other music that it was handmade and things like that. And
I want to go back, talk a little bit about, because 84 was like kind of the end of an era. Like what was, that, like you didn't have, you had obviously in the States, you started to have the Lynn drum machine, you started to have a lot of philosophy from club owners. Why are we paying a quintet when we could just bring a DJ in here to spin records? So the whole idea of live music started to change. But I know Europe has always been a much older soul and obviously supported improvisational music. But could you just paint the picture of that? That what was so authentic? Were you still recording in analog or in '84? Because I don't imagine after you came out of school, the
hmm
landscape, it had basically completely changed.
Yeah, but I when I look back, it's I would say in this like 35, maybe if you go really back to school time, 40
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
I had to redefine my work very often. So where is it happening? How which rule do you have in this music industry? Is there still a role or things like that? Because we know when the 2000s came, the record business broke down slowly, but it broke down, and then all this other stuff came, and we had to find always new places. So we did great music, I would say, but all these channels changed anyway. And I think these 80s were a starting point because a lot of people were really afraid. I remember that. And if I talk to friends who were in the studio scene at that time, they are maybe in their mid 70s now or even older, and they get bright eyes when they talk about the 70s and the first half of the 80s because they were in the studio all the time. So um, every day, really every day. That's why they played so amazing. Because if you're in the situation and can play all the time, you play better. If you're just in the situation once a month, you don't play good, right? I mean, you can practice it, but the situation change. I think that time was the first step where things started for me that I realized you have to deal with that and you have to deal with the sounds. And it started that I'm interested in electronic music and electronic devices because I knew that is an important factor in the future for me.
That's right. If you were going to survive and sing for your supper, you had to adapt to that kind of stuff. Um, so there's an album that I wanted you to talk about because I'm always fascinated. Uh, I don't know if I'll pronounce it correctly. Friedrich Golda. Does that name ring a bell?
Can you say it again, please?
Yeah, Friedrich Golda. Gulda.
Oh yeah, Friedrich Gula. Yeah, I
And
played
then,
with him. I played with him too.
so what I want you to talk, this is really important because you obviously adapted, but I want you to talk about, I know that you were young and obviously things were changing and you were absorbed in your own existence, but this Klaus Weiss and
Hmm.
Fritz Power. Can you talk about the Studio Cats, the Studio Wrecking Crew of Munich in the 70s? Who are those guys? I'd love to know about them.
So in the 80s there was a drummer, Kurt Kress, who did everything, and he had then later on he was in Klaus Doldinger's band too in the
What
70s.
was his name?
Kurt Kress.
Yes, dude. Oh, dude, he did everything, man.
Yeah, he did everything, and in the end he had his own studio called Pilot Studios in
Oh,
the middle of Munich, and he had a real fancy studio where you could change the drum room with glass walls and wooden walls and everything. He was very much into that, and there were a lot of players who are not famous, like an old friend of mine, a bass player, Günther Gebauer, and he was recording really a lot. And then there was I
wow.
unfortunately never met him. Christian Schulze, keyboard player. You might know him because Michael Shreve worked with him.
Oh, wait. Klaus Schultz.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude is a luminary cat, man. I mean, you
Yes.
don't get any bigger than that.
Yeah. And he played a lot of recording sessions. There was film music I was listening to as a kid when I was, I think, 12 or 13. It was a science fiction thing. He played on it, and it was fantastic. I grew up with that stuff. That was amazing, and it
Yeah,
was
okay, so
Christian. And
there's a few cats here. Uh um Kurt Kress, you mentioned. I mean, is that cat still swinging, or what's his deal these days?
I think, as far as I know, he does a little bit, but he had a production company, and he was more into stuff for TV, and he worked with composers, and he did the deals with the companies, and more like this. I think he stopped the studio, I think, end of the 90s, as far as I know. But that was the time when I was already in Austria, in Vienna.
Right. And the only other cat I wanted to ask you about was Wolfgang Schmidt.
Wolfgang Schmidt, yeah, the bass player. He's
Yeah,
he's he is still around, and he's teaching and he's playing.
dude.
And
These are the
I
baddest cats in the. I mean, do you think that you
that
had? Did you have an opportunity with those guys? Because obviously they were making good money in the studios. Were there clubs where they would go out and just play at night for free?
yeah, yeah, that was Munich had a lot of jazz clubs. Wolfgang had a band called Kick, and Wolfgang Hafner played in that band too in the beginning. You know Wolfgang Hafner, the drummer.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know the name. I know all these. I know that dude, this is the baddest cat. These are some of the baddest cats in the world.
He is fantastic. We played in a band together too. We did the first record together, I think, in 1991 or something like that.
How do you spell his last name?
Hafner, it's Haffner.
I know it. Yeah.
And
So
he's a fantastic player. He is with Act Records for a long time, and he does his own projects worldwide. And he has a project. He had a long time project with Niels Landgren. You might know him, a trombone player from Sweden. Lovely guy, a great player, and we played several times with a broadcast big band from Hamburg called NDR Big Band. Great players, amazing players.
amazing players, and you know, Brother Maass, I wanted you to talk a little bit about how, just for my own aesthetic tastes. I mean, I really love the sound of a drum kit where, especially on record, where the way
Mhm,
it's mic'd is that there's minimal mic placement, enough so
mhm,
that you capture the fullness of the drum kit, but yet there's still a room sound to the whole thing.
mhm, mhm.
And I wanted you to talk about, especially because you listen, whether you liked it or not, you had to adapt. and you also became, embedded with electronic drums or synthetic drums, and I wanted you to talk about how your if your ears my feeling just in general, not so much the mini moogs, what Jan Hammer was doing with Mahavishnu, but as synthesizers started to be able to replicate instruments, we just started to get this homogenization of sound. I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but it's just technology has superseded and gone beyond the human element of creation of rhythm. And I just wanted you to talk about and push back if you want to on me about how your ears have grown even using synthetic percussion and drums.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was a longer process because you have to get into the situations. And when I moved to Vienna, beginning 90s, I met some years later in 1995. I worked the first time with Kuda and Dorfmeister. You might know them.
I mean, go ahead, yeah.
And till this point, I played a lot of jazz and studio stuff, and I played a lot of Brazilian music. So the roles for percussion were quite clear. So if you play Brazilian stuff, there's some rules. If you play Afro-Cuban stuff, there's some rules, and then you have to start learning what percussion instruments do in the music. So if you play film scores, you can offer some ideas maybe if there's time, and you have to learn it. If you put this in a reverb, if you put this in a delay and things like that, that it makes room, all these spatial sounds and all that stuff. But I had a certain rule as a percussionist that was the learning process in the beginning. When I started to work with electronic guys like Huda and Dorfmeister, and it was a big time in Vienna at that time, all these downbeat stuff and trip hop and you name it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they wanted something from me that was in the beginning quite hard because they wanted me to step out this traditional roles, and they put it into some, I don't know, Roland tape echo and things like that. So that was not really new. A lot of people did this stuff in end of the 60s and 70s, but so the role in electronic music changed a lot because a lot of people, they never played or learned an instrument, so they had their musical ideas and they searched for other ways to fix their ideas in music. So they hired people in the studio to work with them, and they gave you ideas of what it could be, and you try to find out what it is. And it was not about playing properly on a click track. It was the idea, what percussion does, the atmosphere. How can you play it in another way, not in a traditional way? How can you tune it in a total other way or whatever? What does it do in a lot of reverb, all that stuff? So that was the learning process. And I think a very important step then was I played in a band from, I think that was around the same time, 95, 96 to the end of the 90s. It was a jazz band. It was the band of Harry Sokol. He was a co-founder of the Vienna Art Orchestra. And he put together a band, and the drummer was Jojo Mayer. And Jojo, he introduced me to all this, to his idea of the reverse engineering thing, that he played things people programmed, right? Like he introduced me to all this like Photag, all this drum and bass stuff and things like that. That was the next step that where I realized, okay, there's another way I probably could play percussion that is not the traditional way. And so I dived really deep into all this electronic music and this house music and all these kinds of music. And I had to learn how can I put percussion in that stuff. So there was a traditional way because they liked it too. And there was a lot of things they wanted that were quite atmospheric and things like that. So playing percussions like through a Fender amp or anything. So it was always like challenging. So we spent time just to find sounds. What happens if you play bongos like this or like this, or we do this. And the next thing was, I think, not only for percussion, it was for percussion and drums. In general, I think for all musicians, when this Akai MPC came out, so that changed a lot for me too. So I had to learn that too. What can you do with this stuff? Because if there's a technical development and new sounds come up, everybody uses it. And if you hear a triangle from the 90s, it was a lot of times it was programmed and it was an MPC because you could tune the triangle. So that was the thing, right? And that was the sound everybody was expecting. That started in the 80s. You had
Mm-hmm.
this Kabasa sound, a lot of pop music, and they said, "Do you have a shaker that sounds like that?" And I always said, "That's not a shaker. It's a Kabasa, but we can try it." So it was in the head of the composers and producers, and this is the sound, and you had to be much more careful about sounds, and it changed the taste of people. So it was not possible. I mean, there's always a connotation. When I started playing the first studio gigs I played in Vienna, it was always like, ah, yeah, you play percussion, fantastic. So it's a tambourine on the chorus and maybe a cowbell, but don't come with congas because that's Latin. We don't want Latin now in this tune. It's always a connotation. So I thought, uh, maybe it's good to think in another way and use all this stuff I learned in this electronic area to put my stuff in the music anyway. So I started to use that slowly, and that was a long process till nowadays, definitely.
Well, let me ask you, because I just feel, I mean, he's been a dear friend for a few years. I'm not going to pretend that we go way back, but um, recently he just opened this portal to me of new people like Pat Thrall
Hmm.
and David Torn, and I feel like you got hip to my show possibly through him, and this is Michael Shreve. And I just,
Hmm.
my feeling is he's always interested in the hip thing, which is not always mainstream by any stretch of the imagination, but it's innovation. I think
Hmm.
he was one of the first guys. A father and son came up to him in 1973 in San Diego and showed him sort of their template, or they had built the first electronic drums.
Hmm.
And he started to use those and was kind of a pioneer in that sense. But
Hmm.
when you started to really find your own voice within this new world of recording percussion, is that when you met Michael?
No, yeah, I mean, we met via Instagram. as,
Oh,
as
that is,
simple
yeah.
as simple as that, because I remember when I started my Instagram channel, I was not very much interested in putting music out,
Right.
but and for me that was a new thing in a sense of, oh, I can add another medium to it, because I'm not really very much into practicing, so I always tried hard to practice. So I can't practice on a pad. That's boring for me. So I always I hated it. I tried everything. I sat down in front of a TV and started to do something, and I thought, no, that's not my way of doing. I was wanted to play, and then at a certain point, when I decided maybe not to tour too much anymore, and develop maybe some new things and new ideas, I started to do that. I started to go deeper in the recording process, and I bought this equipment and more equipment and started to record things and tried out all these plugins and effects that were out, which I had before in a way. So I
Right.
used it, but it was in the 90s, 80s, 90s, it was always incredibly expensive. So the entrance was then easier. Now you have a laptop, you can do everything on a laptop. So again, it was a technical revolution in a way, definitely. And then I started to do little movies like 30 seconds and 1 minute. But the idea behind was that I practice for me, find a musical idea. In the best case, do a little piece on a keyboard or whatever, a little idea or atmosphere, and finish something and bring it out.
Huh.
So the whole process for me of making music, I don't want to practice. I want to have the main thing for me as a percussion player, and I think it's for every musician definitely, is the transfer of the things you're able to play or your ideas to transfer it in music, that the music sounds better afterwards, right? So if you're in the studio, you realize you practice a lot, but the music doesn't sound better with the stuff you play. And the producer tells you, oh, yeah, it's a nice idea, but, no. uh,
Wait, hold on. I want to be clear what I'm hearing you say. You're saying being able to transfer what you're hearing in your head onto your instrument? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a thing. What can you do with one instrument, or how can you tune congas in another situation, or if you have a sequenced synthesizer, what how
Right.
um, which things can you play, which instruments fit good, and what can you do with it, and it's a lot about learning about frequencies and things like that, because you're not aware all the time, because you think, oh, my instrument sounds fantastic, but if you come into another musical situation, you have to change things to fit in, right? And that was the starting point with all these videos. So I started to put them out on Facebook, and then later on Instagram, and build up this channel. And Michael came just with a private message, very short. What do you charge for a track? That was it.
Dude, I love this freaking guy, man. He is the biggest talent scout in the world, man. He's
he is
always
he is
looking for the talent, you know?
Yeah, he's amazing. He is amazing. So and then I said, okay, let's see. I don't know what I have to do. And then he sent me some tracks,
Yeah.
and I was listening, and exact the same thing I was working on happened in this music, because you had to find your place, right? Much more than in other music, because it was very creative music, and he thinks that a lot of other ways and what he likes and what he's working on, and the tracks were in different states of development and things like that. And so that started, and I recorded some tracks for him, and then he came up with Drums of Compassion, and he sent me some of the tracks he thought I would fit in. And that made me a little nervous, because a lot of percussion was on that, and that were all my heroes that were playing there. So
I know.
Michael's,
So many Aerto, Zakir, all these
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And Michael's ideas and his playing is so amazing. So and that was challenging. And I personally believe things happen when you're ready to do it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It was
Yeah.
good to be prepared for things like that, and it opened something else again, because this production brought me back to my basics, why I started the fascination of drumming and rhythm and sounds, and all that. So that's our this record is a real journey, and it was a
Can you
journey
talk?
for me
I
to
want you
record
to,
it.
but I want you to talk about, maybe you said it before, but for the audience, what were the reasons that you were drawn to these sounds? What was the original? lineage of your purpose in life?
I think from my very personal point of view, music saved my life because my that's the first point. So my early years as a kid were not easy. So music always still to this point saves my life. Music has a big emotional thing for me. It's like an anchor, and when you're a percussion player that grows up in Bavaria and plays instruments that are definitely not from here, you have to find a way to articulate things in your way. So you learn tradition, and then you realize, okay, that's maybe not my way. You have to find these other levels behind the technical side of rhythm and playing, and that's always the emotional thing. So what is it? And that's the fascinating thing. That's the thing that continues in my development, hopefully. And that's the most important thing. And I would say playing and making music is a is a necessity for me. I have to do it, right? Because
Exactly, exactly.
it's not something where I thought I make money with. It happened so that I can make a living with it for a long time. But it has always music catches me from most of the time. I would say 95%. The older I get, it's maybe more, maybe it's 100% in the end. But it's the emotional thing. It's not the technical thing. When you start playing, you're fascinated by technique. You see people play incredible stuff, and I watch stuff like that or hear it till now, but it's a little bit more far away from me. I like it. You hear something and you get goosebumps, or you can't stop listening, or anything like that. That is the thing I want. And if I record and have a good feeling, and if I get goosebumps when I listen back to the track, then I think it's on a good way. And it's not my home run at that moment that is important. So I think that summarizes my way. Yeah, in a way,
Hey, you nailed it.
because
No, I mean, do you feel like because of the fact that you were being asked in some situations to do a lot of ambient percussion work or environmental sounds or different, were you able to, can you talk about a seminal experience in the studio, maybe with Harold or some old school cat who had a budget and you guys were all, it seems to me like you might be doing a lot of overdubbing in isolation. I could be wrong,
mhm.
but can you talk
Yeah.
about a seminal experience where you were able to get in the studio with all the cats and just play together? To me, there's a uh, it's just it might it might be technically okay. It might, but just this. There's nothing better than just
Mhm.
the albums I
Mhm.
love. The
Mhm.
Jazz Crusaders albums that I love, or the Crusaders, it's Styx Hooper, it's Joe Sample, and it's Wilton Felder, Wayne Henderson, Larry Carlton, and they're all hitting at the same time. And that stuff
Yeah.
just, you can go back and it's just, you can feel the pulse, and the pulse is there. There's no dragging, and it doesn't feel quantized. And I just wonder if you can talk
Mhm.
about. I feel most of your work has probably been done by yourself. I could be wrong, but I just love you talking about a seminal moment
It,
recording
it,
with.
it it depends a little bit on the style. So all this pop stuff or electronic stuff, that were most of the time were overdub sessions. When I came as the last musician who recorded on that, so to find the spots where something is needed, or things like that. In the jazz area, most of the time I recorded live. I remember a recording session where Idris Muhammad played drums, for
Please
example.
talk about that. That man, New Orleans, the baddest cat in the world. I'd
Yeah,
love you to talk about that.
And there was a record with Raul de Souza, and they were recording in Vienna, and I got invited for this session, and
Wow.
he was magic because he, you know, there was a drummer from Vienna who was in the studio at that time who used to play large drum sets and stuff, and he came with two cymbals, and he really changed the cymbal because he played everything on the right cymbal, the crash, everything, and he had so many colors and phrasings just on this one sample,
Oh my
on this
God, that's
on this one
insane,
cymbal,
dude.
and that was really amazing
Yeah, so
to play with
I just want
him.
to be clear though, there was a cat there that had like he was just like flashed out with a huge kit, and there's Idris just coming in, and just based on
Yeah,
his symbol character, he was making all these
yeah,
different timbres and tonalities just in that one symbol.
yeah. Absolutely, and it had such a great groove and vibe, and
Oh
all the
my
color
God.
and all the colors were there, so it was carrying the whole band. You were really I remember this session because I was really careful to add things to that because it was everything there, it was there because everything you added had to be very clearly and that it made sense in the music. So yeah, I love this feeling. For example, that was great. When
What
the
about there's
time.
one other guy I wanted to ask you about. What was your experience playing with Jim Pepper?
Oh, that was very early because Jim Pepper, he was in Bavaria when I was like maybe 17 or 18,
Wow, wow.
and he played then with local bands sometimes, and if you liked the band, you could stay on the stage and continue playing with them. A lot of times he said, oh no, maybe I play alone, I do something, and then he started singing and dancing and everything, and I was playing with him several times, and I stayed on stage. He seemed to like what I did, and then he started to sing and dance and play stuff and Wichita Taito
Sure.
and yeah, that was a great experience. He had this magic too, he had a very special spirit too,
You're
definitely.
darn right he did. Actually, a lot of people don't know this, but he was actually before, way before Weather Report, before The Fourth Way with Mike Knock, before Return to Forever, Mahavishnu.
Yeah,
Uh, Jim Pepper was maybe the band leader of the first electric fusion band in
really.
1967. It was called the Free Spirits with
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Larry Coryell and with Chris Hills on poetry and Rockalon Bob Moses on drums. And I
Hmm.
think I'm leaving somebody out on bass, but I mean, this group was in 1967. And you can imagine
Amazing.
Pepper at that time, and Jack DeJohnette would come in after his gigs and just dance the night away to that band, the Free Spirits. Jim
Great,
Pepper was
great.
really a very heavy, heavy, heavy cat that you saw him in a later part of his life, and I'm sure he just liked the sort of really authentic scene. I mean, obviously not everything worked out, but he probably just enjoyed getting out of the States and being over in Bavaria.
Yeah, he was very often there, and I think he liked it very much, and he teached a little bit. Some people came to him, and he played around, and people liked him, and he was a very open person, and yeah, it was great to play with him at this time. For me, as a very young musician, it was great to just hear it because for us at that time in the 80s, that was the big wide world because we never came out on tour at this time. Yeah, that was very
Right,
hard.
right.
So that was challenging too. But going back to live recordings with a band, so the longest time of experience always was playing big band for me then. So at I mentioned this band before, NDR Big Band, the
Oh yeah,
broadcast big
yeah,
band,
yeah.
and I like the idea. They have a band where everybody is employed, so it's broadcast and it's a government thing, and they have a great job there, and they have a fixed percussion player, but they had no drummer. No drummer was there. So they booked a drummer for every session or recording or tour they liked for the music. And every time I was there, I had fun playing with all these different kinds of drummers who came from all over the world. So, and there was some drummers I really loved to play for. Gary Husband was there very often,
Oh,
for
I mean,
example.
come on, dude. Are you kidding me?
And he is such a lovely guy and
Yeah,
such
he's
a
such a
great
beautiful cat.
musician.
Yeah, just oh my
Yeah,
God, man. Wait, hold on. Did
we were.
like Andre Ceccarelli ever come?
Um, for when
You
I
know that? You
played
know who that
there,
is, right?
no.
You
Yeah,
know who
yeah,
that.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 because
Never, never, never. Okay,
they
so
moved.
yeah.
No, as far as I know, not. But
No, so
it's
tell me.
possible.
So husband. Who were the other cats that you really got off playing with?
So that was always fantastic because his playing, Gary's playing is very special too. He's amazing piano player too. So and there's another guy playing very often. An old friend of mine is Ralph Salmins from London. So
Yes.
he's an amazing session player. He's, I think, not too many people know him, but he played everything, everything. He's an amazing guy, a lovely guy, and he has this ability. I remember the first recording session I played there with this band, and his flight was late, and I was sitting in. They started at 10 or yeah 10 in the morning, and his flight was late, and he came in, and I never met him before, so they had set up the drums, but he brought his cymbals and all that, so, and he put his cymbals on, and I thought, oh, come on. And he was fiddling around with all this stuff and put some notes down according the music we played and all that stuff. And we played the second time we played this piece through, and it was not too easy. And the band sounded, and he made the band sound as if we all played together for the last at least 20 or 25 years. And I was like, I sat there with my mouth open.
Oh my
This
God.
is incredible sound, taste, feel, everything. And you know, really could sit back and could do what you want, and he made you sound good. Because I really love this guy. So I learned a lot from him on his playing. He's an amazing player. He's an amazing session player. I think he really TV, movie, big band, jazz, pop, everything. He played with everything.
If you how I often say this, and I'm not really kidding. I mean, I feel like at this point, at least in this country, uh, words um, words don't really matter anymore. I mean, we're constantly in a litigious state of mind or a combative state of talking
Mm-hmm.
to each other, and I feel like for civilization, the last great hope is rhythm. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about how important, as we go into this time in the world,
Mm-hmm.
how important nonverbal, polyrhythmic expansion, human rhythm is to the sanctity and survival of our society.
Yeah, it simply connects us. Everywhere you go, everywhere where I was, for example, in Africa or everywhere, but when I played festivals there, it connects us. It opens the door for the next step of communication. You know, this is the big connector for me because we all have this. We all feel this. It can be simple. It can be complicated. there's so many things out there
Mm.
that have this magic and this emotion and this tradition and this deep thing in the best case, that will always connect us everywhere I went. I remember, it's 10 years ago now. I play minor stuff, equipment, and there's a company 300 kilometers from here, and they sent an email if I want to do a workshop in Tehran. And I said, okay, I do it. And it was quite complicated at that time to go to Iran. It's much more complicated now, I think.
Wow,
But
Tehran. Wow. Yeah, no,
yeah,
but it's still very hard then, though.
yeah, it's and at that time it was a little easier, and so there is a big drum community and percussion community,
Wow.
and they invited some people, and at that time it was easier with the German passport, so they let you in, and I thought, I don't know what happened there, so I do it. My wife said, "You don't go; it's too dangerous," and I said.
Yeah, no, no, I mean, I do. That is one of the gutsiest trips. But go ahead. I mean, talk about the experience.
Yeah, and I thought I want to do that because the people were connecting. They were very nice, and they took care that everything works. And I came there, and people traveled 1,000 kilometers to come to this workshop, to this meeting. So there were some days we worked together there in Tehran, and there was one person translating because I have no idea about Farsi and I don't understand a word, and he was translating what I said. And they have so many rhythms. They have such an old tradition, music tradition, percussion tradition, so old rhythms. They go back for 3,000 years and more, I think. And what you have there is you connect immediately because you know it's the same language, and you watch this item we're talking about just from another perspective, right? But that was really amazing to work with them and listen to them, and they listened to me, and we were playing together, and we had dinner, and the hospitality was incredible because the respect for music is so big, because music has amazing meaning there, and still has because it means freedom.
Right. I
It's
would just say that, like,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
freedom. It's freedom.
it's clearly repressed, though. I mean, the government
Yeah,
only will
yeah,
allow so much, you know.
yeah, yeah. So that was for me incredible to experience that, and there's or at that time there was a big music scene. We didn't know here in Europe about that. Nobody knows about that probably, but there's a big music scene, and I mean the conditions got worse now, but definitely. But at that time, I really don't. I think that was a very important experience for me. What music can do in the communication, right? So
Well,
you come
it is a
there. Yes,
universal language,
yes,
you know, and
yeah, yeah,
therefore for very repressive regimes, it's very threatening. And that was the case with
abs
slavery in this country, and it still remains that way.
absolutely.
You know, I just wanted to say as we wrap up set one here, because we got to definitely do another set here. Um, the Iranian rhythms. I mean, you have the tablas in India, and you have all that kind of
Hmm.
polyrhythm stuff going on. And what are how would you describe the indigenous rhythm, the Persian rhythms? Is it like belly
So
dance
there's
kind of rhythms?
mm, no, no. They have certain roles. There are two main instruments. There's tombak and there's
Tombak,
duff, and
yep,
the duff
yep.
is a big. Yeah, and they're masters for tombak, and they're this complex rhythms, complex sounds. So they have a lot of odd meters and very virtuose, play things. So they're amazing players. I have a tombak down there, but I rarely touch it because I have really respect because I heard this players there and that was really who this is really amazing. And the Duff is a big frame drum and it's as far as I know it's the instrument of women. So they played in kind of orchestras, they played unison, and it sounds amazing too. So what I didn't know too, that there are a lot more women playing percussion and drums than here in Europe. I didn't expect that too.
Yeah, me either. I mean, I just think it's refreshing that you had an opportunity to go there. Stefan, can we do set two maybe next week?
I yeah, next week is okay. Then after the next week I leave to holidays to
Okay,
Greece.
so I reach out to you. We set a time for next week.
Fantastic, we can do that. That's
Yeah,
fun,
great. No, it's an
definitely.
honor to connect with you, man. I really appreciate all the healing that you've done in this world, and yeah, we'll definitely continue the conversation.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Of course, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
Cheers, my friend.
hear you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.